Sometimes the strangest moments arrive without warning. A flash of light, a figure in the dark, a story that refuses to fade. Tonight, we step into those quiet places where the unexplained waits, just beyond the edge of the ordinary. This is Strange Encounters, and these are the events people can't forget. I grew up in a small coastal village in Wales, the kind of place where the wind always seems to come sweeping up from the sea, and where the schoolyard felt like the center of the whole world. I was only 10 years old in February of 1977, but that afternoon has stayed with me far more vividly than anything else from that age. You don't forget something that shakes the foundation of how you understand the world, even if you only understand it as a child. Back then, Broadhaven Community Primary School sat beside rolling green fields and narrow country roads. On most days, the biggest excitement was a football game or someone sneaking a comic book into class. But that particular day, just after lunch break, everything felt strangely quiet. Even at 10, you can sense a shift in the air when something unusual is about to happen, even if you don't know what it is yet. I remember standing near the edge of the playground, the asphalt giving way to long grass that grew high around the perimeter fence. It was cold, and most of us kept our hands jammed into our pockets. Someone kicked a ball too far, and it rolled into the tall grass. A couple of us jogged after it, not thinking much of anything, and that's when I noticed it. A flash of silver, low in the field beyond the schoolyard, just past the scrub line. At first, I thought it was just a reflection off a tractor or maybe a piece of equipment, but tractors don't sit perfectly still, hovering just above the ground. This thing did. It was shaped like a flattened oval, metallic craft that looked almost like two saucers pressed together, smooth, seamless, and silent. The daylight glinted off its surface in a way that didn't match anything familiar. It wasn't huge, maybe the size of a small car, but it felt larger because it seemed so out of place. Everything around it looked normal. The field, the hedgerow, the school building behind us. But this object sat quietly as if it were observing us or waiting. I remember feeling my stomach drop, not in fear exactly, but in that way you feel when something simply shouldn't exist, and yet there it is, right in front of you. A couple of us stared for a few seconds before running to tell the teacher, convinced we had just discovered something extraordinary. That's the funny thing about being a child. You think adults will have the answers. You think they'll look at the same thing and explain it instantly. But the teacher just brushed us off, telling us to stop making up stories and get back to the yard. I remember feeling frustrated, knowing what I'd seen was real, and so did several others. That shared certainty between kids, it becomes almost electric. We were all buzzing, pointing back toward the field. Some of us went to the fence again, trying to get another look. When I glanced back a second time, the craft hadn't disappeared. It had simply shifted. It was slightly farther back now, tucked near the hedgerow. Still silver, still smooth, and still completely silent. There was no dust, no vibration, no sound of an engine, nothing to suggest movement, yet it had moved. What struck me the most, even at that age, was the stillness around it. The wind kept moving through the grass and hedges, the air smelled like damp soil and sea salt, and the other kids were still shouting and running around, but none of that seemed to reach the object. It existed in its own pocket of calm. Then I saw something I've never forgotten. Just beside the craft, partly obscured by the hedgerow, stood a figure. It was tall, taller than an adult, and appeared to be wearing some kind of silver suit that matched the metallic sheen of the craft. The head looked helmet-like or possibly elongated, but the distance made it impossible to say for sure. What mattered was the feeling. I knew instantly that this was connected to the craft, and I knew just as instantly that whatever I was looking at wasn't a person out for a stroll. The figure didn't move like a person either. It stood completely motionless, as if watching, not threatening, not friendly, just present. I felt an instinctive chill, the kind that starts at the base of your spine and works upward. I didn't understand the moment, but some deeper part of me recognized how strange it was, how wrong it was, as if I'd glimpsed something not meant to be seen. By the time more kids started shouting that they saw something too, the figure had slipped behind the hedgerow, almost as if it didn't want to be observed by so many eyes. A few seconds later, the craft rose straight up, effortlessly, without sound. Not fast at first, just smooth, steady. Then, in an instant, it shot upward and vanished into the sky. No trail, no exhaust, no mechanical noise, just gone. The rest of the day felt surreal. Some kids were excited, others were frightened, and teachers tried to calm everyone down. But the story spread through the school almost immediately. We were separated and asked to draw what we'd seen. I remember gripping my pencil, trying my best to show the shape, the metallic surface, the way it hovered. When we compared the drawings later, so many of them matched. That was the moment I realized we hadn't all imagined the same thing. We'd seen it. Over the years, the memory hasn't faded. If anything, it has sharpened. I can still picture the silvery craft sitting in that quiet field, the figure standing beside it, the way the air seemed to shift around the scene. I can still feel the weight of knowing I witnessed something extraordinary, long before I had the vocabulary to understand what it might mean. Sometimes I think about that day and wonder how many other children around the world have had similar moments tucked into the corners of their memory. Something strange, unexplained, impossible, and yet undeniably real. For me, Broadhaven was that moment. A flash of the unknown on an ordinary school afternoon. An encounter that has stayed with me for a lifetime. People always tell you that life-changing moments come with warning signs, a feeling in your gut, a strange dream, a sense that something in the world is about to shift. But the night my life changed forever, there were no warning signs, just a quiet highway outside Ririe, Idaho, a dead radio, and a light in the fields that didn't belong to this earth. This is what happened to me in the summer of 1967, and I've never been the same since. Back then, Ririe was even smaller than it is today. A handful of farms, a few miles of quiet road, and nights so dark you could see every star in the sky. I was driving home late after visiting a friend. The moon was full, hanging low enough to touch the tips of the wheat fields. I'd rolled the windows down. The warm summer air felt good after a long day. About 20 minutes outside town, the radio gave a sharp pop and went silent. Not static, just dead. I hit the dial once, twice, but nothing. I remember frowning, leaning forward a little, thinking how strange it was, but at the time, it felt like just another small annoyance. I had no idea it was the first sign. The road was empty. Not a single other pair of headlights in either direction. Just me, the car, and that endless stretch of Idaho night. Then I saw the glow. At first, I thought it was a house out in the distance, or maybe a tractor's floodlight, but the color wasn't right. It wasn't yellow. It wasn't the soft orange-white you get from farm equipment. It was a sharp, pale blue-white, almost like welding light, but softer, like it was being diffused through fog. I slowed down, leaning toward the windshield. The further I drove, the brighter it became. And then my headlights flickered. The dashboard lights dimmed. A second later, the engine coughed so violently I gripped the steering wheel with both hands. I tapped the gas pedal. Nothing. The car sputtered, shuddered, and died. I coasted to the shoulder in silence. The field to my right glowed like someone had dropped a piece of the moon into the wheat. But it wasn't a reflection. The light was coming from a craft. A domed, oval-shaped object sat just above the stalks, not resting on them, not bending them, floating, hovering, motionless. I opened the driver's door. I don't know why. Curiosity, fear, shock, maybe all of it. But my feet were on the gravel before I fully realized what I was doing. The air felt wrong, electric, heavy, like the moment before a lightning strike. Then the humming started. It wasn't coming from the craft, at least not exactly. It was everywhere, around me, above me, inside me. A low vibration, so deep I could feel it in my bones. My vision wobbled at the edges, just slightly. That's when I noticed movement in the field. At first, I thought it was the wind bending the wheat, but the air was still, perfectly still. Something was moving between the stalks, tall, thin, gliding more than walking. I could see its outline before I could see the details, and my breath caught in my throat. The figure stepped out into the open, illuminated by that blue-white glow. It wasn't human, not even close. Its body was long and narrow, with limbs that looked too thin to support it. Its skin was pale, smooth, and almost reflective, like wet stone under moonlight. Its head was elongated, with no hair, no ears, just a smooth curve rising into the night. And its eyes were enormous, glossy, pitch black. Eyes that didn't blink. Eyes that studied me. Every instinct in my body screamed for me to run, but I couldn't move. Not from fear, from something else, something holding me still. I felt pressure behind my eyes, a pushing sensation, like invisible hands gently pressing on my thoughts. The being lifted one long arm, slow, deliberate, almost like it was reaching out to calm me. The humming grew louder, sharper, more focused. The wheat around the craft began to sway, even though the air remained still. Then the entire object brightened in a sudden flash, and the world vanished. I was no longer on the highway. I stood in a room so bright it hurt to look at, yet somehow I could see clearly. There were no corners, no seams, no shadows, just smooth surfaces, white, metallic, seamless, curving upward like I was inside a hollow shell. The air was warm. And silent, completely silent. The being was with me. It stood only a few feet away, its massive eyes fixed on me. I felt something again. Not force, not control, but an impression, like emotions brushing against my mind. Curiosity, recognition, a sense of study. I tried to speak, I think. I don't know if any sound came out. All I knew was that the being was inside my thoughts, turning them over like pages in a book. I heard nothing with my ears, but a message formed in my mind. Do not fear. Then something changed. A second figure appeared behind the first, slightly shorter, moving with quick, precise steps. A sudden sharp sensation passed through my temples, like cold fingers brushing the inside of my skull. Images flashed behind my eyes, colors, patterns, stars too many to count, swirling in ways I couldn't understand. Then darkness. I gasped and staggered forward. I was back on the side of the road. My car was still there. Door open, headlights dim. The field was empty. Perfectly empty. The wheat unbent. The night silent. No craft. No light. No humming. I stared at the sky, half expecting something to streak away, but there was nothing. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely pull myself into the driver's seat. I turned the key. The engine started immediately. It took me a few minutes to calm down enough to drive. When I finally got home, I looked at my watch. I had lost 2 hours. 2 hours that felt like 10 minutes. 2 hours I have never accounted for. For days afterward, I woke up with that low humming echoing faintly in my skull. Not loud enough to hurt, just enough to remind me that something had been inside my mind. Remind me that something, somewhere, knew who I was. I didn't tell anyone for a long time, but the truth is, I don't think that encounter was accidental. I don't think I just happened to drive down that road at the wrong time. I think they wanted me there. I think I was chosen. And sometimes, on nights when the sky is clear and the moon hangs low over the fields, I swear I can still feel that presence. Watching, waiting, as if the encounter in Ririe was only the beginning. It was early December of 1978 in the small rural community of Vader, Washington, a quiet place where the sounds of winter are mostly wind in the trees and the hum of the nearby Bonneville power lines. But for the Bowers family, those early days of the month would become some of the strangest they would ever experience. The first sign that something was wrong wasn't in the sky, it was on the ground. Mrs. Wallace Bowers had stepped outside one Friday to find a set of massive footprints pressed deeply into the soil around the family shed. There was no snow, no mud, nothing that should have allowed impressions that clean. The grass was crushed in places, gravel was shifted aside in others, and the prints were so large she immediately thought of the stories local kids told about Bigfoot sightings in the woods. Sheriff William Weister was called out to the property. He photographed the prints and told Mrs. Bowers that they didn't match any known animal or any typical hoax pattern. But without more evidence, the prints would remain a mystery. And just a few days later, the mystery deepened. On the morning of December 7th, one of the Bowers children called out from the window, urging their mother to look. Expecting to maybe see the creature again, Mrs. Bowers rushed to the glass, but what she saw was nothing like Bigfoot. Rising smoothly into the sky, above the power lines was a bright orange disc-shaped craft. It looked as though it was angling upward, as if climbing deliberately, and then slowly drifting into the distance. Mrs. Bowers would later describe it as a glowing disc with a central dome, almost as if a smaller circle was rotating around a larger one. The outer edge glowed with a sharp, bright rim. At first, it was deep orange, but as it gained altitude and angle, the color shifted into a clear, intense red. It wasn't just drifting. The object seemed to move with intention, straight away from the property at times, then shifting sideways as though banking like an aircraft, then changing direction again. At one point, it paused directly above the power lines, hovering silently. To Mrs. Bowers and her children, it looked like a star that had suddenly come alive. As she watched, a gray shape, that's the phrase she used, dropped away from the object's path and fell out of sight behind the tree line. They couldn't tell what it was, too far away, too quick, and overshadowed by the brightness of the craft itself. But the children saw it, and they described it the same way. After almost 10 minutes, the glowing object finally pulled away, fading into the cold December sky. But the strangeness did not end there. Later that same week, Mrs. Bowers was placing a log on the fire in the living room when she noticed the curtains moving in the boys' bedroom. The airflow in the house didn't account for it, and all the children were accounted for, every one of them in the living room with her. The room where the curtains moved was positioned at the far end of the home, out of the way and not in any kind of draft path. The movement was deliberate, slow, and unnerving. She reacted instantly, ushering all 4 children out of the house and into the family truck. Whatever had caused the disturbance She wasn't staying around to find out. When her husband came home from work that night, he helped her search the entire house. They found nothing out of the ordinary, no signs of entry, no marks, no tracks, nothing disturbed. But the boys refused to sleep in that room for days. Even their dog had been acting strangely since the footprints incident, lingering near them nervously and refusing to go near the shed. The combination of events, the massive prints, the strange aerial object rising over the power lines, the shifting colors, the falling gray shape, the interior disturbance, left the family shaken and unsure what to believe. Mrs. Bauer said afterward that she kept encountering people in the community who admitted, quietly, that they had seen things over the years too, things they never reported because they were afraid of being ridiculed. Her family wasn't interested in attention, and the children had already been frightened enough. Even the sheriff, cautious as he was, didn't dismiss her entirely. He acknowledged the prints were unlike anything he had documented. What happened in Vader, Washington during those early days of December 1978 remains an unresolved case, a mix of physical traces, aerial phenomena, and unexplained activity inside the home. Whatever it was, the Bowers family experienced multiple layers of strangeness in a very short period of time, leaving behind a story that quietly lingered in the area long after the events ended. On the night of May 14, 1988, a man named Amaury Rivera was driving alone through the rural backroads of Puerto Rico. He was heading home from a nightclub near the town of Cabo Rojo, and the hour was late enough that most of the island seemed to be sleeping. The darkness was thick. The air was humid. And Amaury, only in his 20s at the time, was thinking more about the long drive ahead than anything unusual. But then, along that quiet stretch of road, something strange began to happen. Amaury noticed a glow behind his car. Not headlights, something brighter, whiter, almost like a portable stadium light being carried through the air. He glanced in his rearview mirror and saw a sphere of intense white shining directly behind him, pacing the car perfectly. His first thought was that it was some kind of helicopter, maybe the police, maybe a searchlight. But the light wasn't behaving like anything mechanical. It glowed without flicker, without shadow, and without sound. As he watched it, the sphere suddenly surged forward. It didn't accelerate so much as jump toward him, closing the distance instantly, until it filled the entire rear windshield like a miniature sun. The inside of the car turned white. His hands glowed on the steering wheel. His chest lit up like he was sitting inside an X-ray machine. Then everything went black. Amaury wasn't sure if he had passed out or if something else had happened, but when he opened his eyes again, the road was gone, the car was gone, and the darkness around him was no longer the night sky. He was lying on his back in a wide, circular room with smooth metallic walls. The air felt cold. There were no seams, no visible lights, yet everything seemed illuminated by a strange ambient glow. As he tried to sit up, Amaury realized he wasn't alone. 3 small beings, each barely 4 feet tall, stood around him. Their skin was a pale, bluish gray. Their eyes were large, almond-shaped, and entirely black. Their movements were perfectly smooth. No wasted motion, no hesitation. They watched him with what he later described as clinical curiosity, like surgeons observing a patient before a procedure. They didn't speak aloud, but Amaury heard them anyway. Thoughts, ideas, impressions landing directly in his mind. A steady, calm message repeated itself. Do not fear. You will understand. Before he could respond, another presence entered the room. This time, Amaury felt something different. The small being stepped back, almost deferentially, and a taller figure approached. Unlike the smaller ones, this being looked startlingly human. tall, muscular, with tan skin and long black hair that fell past his shoulders. His eyes were deep brown, almost warm, and although his clothing was simple, tight-fitting, metallic, and seamless, his posture radiated authority. "I am Amaury," the figure said, but his lips never moved. This, like everything else, was communication inside the mind. Amaury raised a hand, and the three smaller beings faded into the periphery. Then he gestured toward a curved wall that grew transparent like dimming glass, revealing an impossible sight outside. A vast alien landscape stretched out. 3 distant suns hanging in the sky, each a different shade of red and white. A network of honeycomb-like structures floated above the surface as if suspended by invisible threads. Strange, insect-like machines moved slowly across a metallic plane, their bodies unfolding and refolding like living origami. "We call this world Ka," Amaury said. "It is not near your star. It is older. It has seen cycles your world has not yet known." The next moment, without walking or moving, Amaury found himself standing on the surface of Ka. No transition, no sensation. One instant he was inside the structure, the next he was outside, with Amaury beside him. Scenes unfolded around him as if the planet itself were telling a story. Tall, crystalline towers pulsed with internal light. Pools of molten silver churned without heat, and far overhead, ribbon-like formations of cloud twisted and looped like serpents dancing across the sky. Amaury asked, through thought, what this place was. Amaury answered, "A record, a memory projected for you, not physical but true." The scene shifted again. Now Amaury stood inside a vast hall filled with geometric pillars and floating spheres that pulsed like beating hearts. Figures walked between them, tall, human-like beings who looked almost identical to Amaury, not clones, but belonging unmistakably to the same species. Their expressions were calm, focused, and even solemn. "This is what will become of your world," Amaury said, and suddenly Amaury saw Earth, not the Earth he recognized, an Earth torn by disaster. Cities lay in darkness, their power grid shattered. Skyscrapers buckled like wet cardboard. Massive waves rolled across coastlines, swallowing towns whole. Clouds of ash hung over entire continents, and in the distance he saw what looked like the remnants of nuclear detonations. Humanity appeared scattered, desperate, and broken. "This is a projection of what may come," Amaury explained. "Not prophecy, possibility. Your world is nearing a threshold." Amaury asked what kind of threshold. Amaury showed him flashes of ideas rather than pictures. Ecological collapse, global conflict, epidemics, political fragmentation, and, most emphasized, misuse of emerging technology. The message was not subtle. Humanity, he said, was on the verge of becoming either extraordinarily powerful or irrevocably self-destructive. "We intervene rarely," Amaury said. "Your species must choose its own path, but awareness is sometimes necessary." The vision shifted again. This time Amaury saw a different group of beings, tall, insect-like creatures with elongated limbs and segmented faces. Thousands of them worked in perfect unison inside a biomechanical hive. Amaury explained the Ka was not a single species domain, but a collective ecosystem of intelligent life, some peaceful, some predatory. Then he showed Amaury a truth that unsettled him more than anything else. Earth, he said, was not isolated. It was part of a larger network of developing worlds, each monitored, each occasionally visited, and each evaluated for its potential role in a much bigger cosmic structure. "We are not gods," Amaury clarified, sensing Amaury's rising fear. "We are caretakers, observers, and sometimes guides." That last word lingered in Amaury's mind. Guides. The projections faded, the alien landscapes dissolved, and Amaury found himself once again inside the circular metallic room. The three small beings returned, standing silently near the walls, watching. Amaury approached him one final time. "You will forget much," he said, "but not all, and what remains will be enough." The room began to swim in white light. Amaury felt weightless, then heavy, then weightless again. A rushing sound filled his ears like air being sucked out of the atmosphere. Then he was back. He woke up inside his car. Engine off, headlights dim, sitting on the side of a road he didn't recognize. Hours had passed. His shirt was inside out. His watch was missing. And the night sky above him looked strangely still, as if the world itself had paused. Amaury stumbled out of the car, disoriented. His legs felt weak. His thoughts were jumbled. But when he looked down at the hood of the car, he froze. There were fingerprints, large ones pressed into the metal, deep impressions, almost claw-like, that looked nothing like human hands. It took him days to piece together the memories, days more before he could talk to anyone. And even then, Amaury knew that most people would never believe him. But he also knew something else. The message he'd been given wasn't meant just for him. It was meant to be told. Amaury's story has been debated, criticized, defended, and analyzed for decades. But within UFO circles, and especially within abduction research, his account stands out because of its scale. Most abductions are personal, isolated, fragmented. Amaury's experience was sweeping, philosophical, even cosmic in scope. Whether it was a true visitation, a psychological break, or something in between, Amaury described it as the moment his understanding of reality cracked open, and something vast and ancient looked back at him. And whether we believe his message or not, one detail remains haunting. When Amaury asked Amaury why he was chosen, why a young man driving alone at night would be shown visions of alien worlds and the possible future of humanity, Amaury gave him a simple answer: because someone must remember. What lingers after an account isn't just fear or curiosity, it's the sense that reality might be wider than we think. If you've had an experience of your own, you're not alone. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep your eyes open. The next strange encounter might already be on its way.